will be a very fruitful and dynamic session for you. The presentation will be made by me and by Ms. Tazin Qureshi, who is a researcher at CESRIC. I would like to thank her for joining us today. So the aim of today's session is to highlight the OIC youth strategy and to discuss the contents and the findings of the State of Youth report. But before starting, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Evren Talk, who is professor at Hamad bin Khalifa University, to welcome the participants. Doctor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ms. Amal. I really appreciate and really admire the amazing work that you do at Icyf and Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum. It has been an honor for us to collaborate and get going with all these engagements in the past 2 years. And it's also great to see familiar faces like there Ms. Tazin, who was in Qatar before and who knows some of our students. And of course, I have to acknowledge the great support that we are getting from our leaders, His Excellency Mr. Taha, also our Dean and Provost and President of HBKU. So at the end of the day, I believe it's these engagements that create the most important substance for collaborations, right? To keep them alive. And the students today who are joining from our side are taking the course called Global Inequalities. And your amazing report, I believe, is a great contribution for the youth to better understand, diagnose, and think more on and reflect more on the existing inequalities, where they come from, what are the dynamics, contextual, historical, and even social, actually, mechanics behind them. So that's an important source to our course, but of course, it's a great source for Muslim youth and policymakers, public-private actors, civil societies, and all different sectors, actually, to better understand, diagnose, and act towards inequalities and other social and economic problems that we encounter today. So once again, special thanks for making this accessible. And I really hope that for those of the colleagues who are missing this session today, if the YouTube link can be shared with us in later stages, then we can post it on our social media and other channels, and our students would have a chance to benefit from it. And once again, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dr. Evren, for your kind words. Our cooperation with Hamad bin Khalifa University and with you personally has been always a fruitful and productive cooperation. Thank you very much, and get me Shorson again. So, dear participants, I would like to give you some points about the program flow today. So I will start with introducing the OIC youth strategy for 20 minutes or 15 to 20 minutes. Then I will give the floor to Ms. Tazin to speak about the report. Then maybe we'll open the floor to the question answer session, or maybe you can just write the question in the chat box to discuss it later. So, as I said, I will be making a short presentation on OIC youth strategy as a general framework for the State of Youth report, and I will focus on 3 parts. So, if my colleague Ms. Merve can share the presentation. Yes, next slide, please. Next one. Thank you. So I will focus on 3 main parts. The first one will be the OIC youth strategy, its vision, why it is and it was necessary, and what are the aims and the programs under this strategy. In the second part, I will speak about the State of Youth report, its background, how it was adopted, the aim, and how we conducted it and its method. Then in the end, I will introduce my institution, Icyf, as a partner in the preparation of the reports and what was our role during the implementation process. So I would like to start by highlighting the meaning and the definition of strategy, because we have a student with us, and I know that the conceptual framework, it's always important for the students. So what is a strategy? So it's defined as the plan of action designed to achieve a long-term or overall aim. So basically, the strategy determines somehow the direction and scope of an organization over a long time. So it's 5, 10, 15 years, not less than this number. And in general, the strategy should determine how resources should be configured to meet the needs. Therefore, the OICU strategy is defined as a plan that helps us to achieve overall objectives related to the youth aspect in the OIC member states. So, this strategy was adopted and designed just to deal with the youth issues in the OIC member states. Then the question that might be asked: what is the necessity of the OIC strategy, and why the OIC come up with a strategy for youth? And if you read the OICU strategy document, you will find out that there is an importance of the youth segments in the OIC region, both in terms of quantity, numbers, and in terms of quality. And they provided some statistics, and according to it, the OIC member states together account for 1/4, which means 27% of young population in the world. And there is another expectation saying that by 2050, OIC member states are projected to have more than 1/3, which means 35% of the world's young population. So it's a kind of young region, and really it's a huge number. And in terms of quality, we mean the effective role that can be played by the youth in different sectors in their countries. And the second aspect, which is highlighted in the OIC youth strategy, is the common challenges that youth are facing in the OIC region. These similarities in terms of challenges promoted a comprehensive, let's say, strategy toward a solution. And in this context, the adoption of an OICU strategy has become essential to achieve different objectives. Next slide, please. Next one. Thank you. So these objectives are four. The first one is creating a joint framework. What do we mean by this? Is to enable cooperation and support among member states, especially in identifying economic, cultural, and policy-related challenges. And because, the reason behind establishing any international organization, European Union, African Union, Arab League, etc., is to enhance cooperation and integration. So the aim of the OICU strategy is creating a joint framework for the youth. The second one is establishing sustainable policies in the areas of culture, of economy and politics, health, technology, etc. So all these important sectors to support young people. And the third aim is developing new frameworks, which is related to the aspect of citizenship, because it's very important aspects to the strategy as well to the countries, and how to enable young people to be active politically and socially, and to ensure a maximum participation of young people in their countries. The last one is providing a new mechanism that would allow these young people to produce innovative solution for the socio-economic problems or development of their societies. And here it shows us how the strategy is perceiving and understanding the youth segment as a change maker, not only as a problem, but also as a change maker, as an effective actor in the society and in the country. And here we should also mention that these four adopted objectives are in line with three basic frameworks. Next, please. Yes. The first one is global, related to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, especially in regards to education, poverty, peace, justice, economic growth, etc. And the second one is regional, which is in line of the OIC 2025 Plan of Action. I advise you to check it also. It's on the OIC website. And this would contribute to the implementation of this plan, in particular on countering terrorism, Islamophobia, advancement and empowerment of women and social security. Also, the third one, or the third regional framework, is we line it with the 10 goals agreed upon the first OIC Young Leaders Summit, which was held in Istanbul in April 2016. And this summit, youth met together and wrote a list of objectives that was adopted also in the OIC strategy, like upscaling the educational level and extend proper training, like ensuring greater participation, preventing radicalization, and empowering peaceful voices of the Muslim youth in the West or in the non-Muslim communities. And the OICU strategy here, we can observe that it used different international and regional sources in order to produce a comprehensive and accurate document. Next, please. Thank you. So the vision of the OICU strategy was about improving the well-being of youth in OIC member states based on the report issued by the OIC Specialized Research Institution. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
Okay. And adoption of a joint action that could eliminate socio-economic challenges that youth are facing. This is the vision. And for the main areas of priorities, next, please. So here we have the education as a main priority, which focus on improving literacy, enrollment rates, investing into quality of education, addressing gender disparities, and developing science. I think I have also a problem like Dr. Evren. Sorry, just one second. So the second one is youth employment. And here we are investing into formal education and vocational and education training, which is called VET programs, and it's organized by CESRIC, making effective labor market reforms and ensuring macroeconomic stability. And here we are working on a project also called OIC Intern with our international partners like CESRIC and YTB. And these programs gives the opportunity for professional experience to young people through work ethics, work discipline, and teamwork experience. And also is contribute to the development of knowledge and skills of young people to facilitate their interest into entrance into the labor markets. We have also one of these areas which called youth and extremism, through developing a comprehensive understanding of both the root causes and route towards extremism, and how to provide alternative space for self-expression and amplify new narrative. And in this regard, Icyf recently implemented a program, an online program, which called Capacity Building Program on Strategies of CVE, or Countering Violent Extremism, for Libyan youth in partnership with the CESRIC and BINA program. And the program focused on the religious discourse and were conducted by experts from different institutions in Qatar and Switzerland. So these are some areas of the OIC youth strategy. And here in the extremism also, I wanted to mention that one of the OIC institution, sorry, that is working on the radicalization is Sawt al-Hikmah. And you may check the website of this organization. They are doing very good job writing reports and studies. So we have also entrepreneurship as a main area of Oic Youth strategy. And here we are emphasizing on building a fertile and balanced entrepreneurial ecosystem and invest into human capital. And as ICYF, we are guided by the Oic Youth strategy priorities. We established the Young Business Hub, departments dedicated to young entrepreneurs. And the department has been developed for overcoming the economic problems of the youth. And recently we implemented the Young Business Hub in Inspiring Stories. Next, please. So these are the main areas of priorities for Oic Youth strategy. They were followed by some implementation. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Tazin, then I will continue. Ms. Tazin? Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Amal. If I can share my screen, please.
Yes, yes.
Right. So first of all, thank you, Ms. Amal, and thank you, Dr. Evren. I hope he feels better soon. I hope everyone is well, all the students, and you guys are keeping safe. I know the situation is a little tricky in Qatar right now as well. I want to first thank the organizers at EdgeBKU for inviting CESRIC to this event and for asking CESRIC to share its research with, oh, I'm sorry, 1 second, please. Can you see my presentation screen?
Yes, we can see it, Ms. Tazin.
Sorry, yes. I'm so sorry, yes. So thank you, EdgeBKU, for inviting CESRIC to share its research with the students, and bringing policy research to an academic setting is always an enlightening experience, especially for policy researchers such as me and even I think Ms. Amal. This is mostly because academic findings often have real-life policy implications and vice versa. So my name is Tazeen Qureshi, and I am a researcher at CESRIC, and I'm with you today to share the findings of our report on the state of youth in the OIC member countries. This is a 2020 report with a thematic focus on enhancing the economic participation of youth, which I think is very relevant given the ongoing socioeconomic hurdles posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, according to our director, His Excellency Mr. Nabil Dabour, understanding the state of youth is a very important factor that can help the 57 member states of OIC in developing and implementing sustainable policies that target a range of issues faced by Muslim youth and seek to optimize their potentials. And obviously, our report is in line with the OIC Youth strategy that Ms. Amal has just discussed. Now, CESRIC, being one of the leading subsidiary organs of the OIC, undertakes a number of activities in relation to the advancement of young people. For the sake of clarity, by young people or by youth, when I use it through my presentation, I mean people between the ages of 15 and 24, which is also a definition adopted by the United Nations. As one of the earliest established subsidiary organs of OIC, CESRIC is mandated to work in the domain of research, statistics, and training. And CESRIC has been contributing actively to the efforts of OIC and its member states towards enhancing even national level capacities and intra-OIC cooperation on issues related to young people. Now, in addition to the 2020 State of Youth report that I will present shortly, CESRIC produces various types of interdisciplinary research to provide an in-depth understanding of the state of youth across all OIC member countries. Now, it's through these types of evidence-based analysis that we can identify the needs and challenges of young people, and then we can formulate policies, programs, and initiatives to help improve their welfare. Now, in this respect, CESRIC has many reports that are dedicated solely to youth, as well as reports in which the issue of youth intersects with other social issues. For example, our reports on family, women, children, and the elderly, just to name a few, all include different types of dialogues and discussions pertaining to youth. Now, we complement our research efforts by also serving as the main statistical hub for the OIC member states. CESRIC has hosted the first and the only international official statistical database for OIC countries called the OIC Stat, in which we have about 750 different indicators under 24 categories, and in which 22 are directly related to youth. Under our statistical capacity building program, that is StatCab, we also try to transfer and share our expertise with the national statistics offices in different member states. We organize training workshops which aim to enhance their technical capacities in collecting, categorizing, and analyzing data. And then, more importantly, to provide young people with an opportunity to gain work experience and develop their skills through hands-on learning, CESRIC has also participated in the OIC Intern Program, which Ms. Amal also mentioned. With this program, over 600 students in 2018 and 19 period were placed in different companies and institutions across the OIC countries. The OIC Intern Program has become a very important success story of the OIC on the whole, especially for institutions such as Icyf and CESRIC. Another activity that CESRIC regularly conducts since 2017 is training course for junior diplomats. And through this course, the future generations of diplomats from OIC member states are given opportunities to enrich their knowledge on topics related to diplomacy, conflict resolution, mediation, etc. And along with all of these activities, CESRIC also hosts and partners with a number of OIC institutions and international institutions to organize various training sessions, transfers of knowledge, skills, and resources to empower youth. Now, these are just some examples amongst the numerous activities that CESRIC undertakes, but I feel like this is a good point to let you know a little bit of our background, as in why I'm here and why I am qualified to talk about the topic at hand. Now, as I just mentioned, one of our core mandates is to conduct policy research, which is social as well as economic research, and we often present this research in the form of technical background reports to different ministerial sessions of the OIC member states. This is where the State of Youth Report 2020 comes in. This report is a biennial publication, which was mandated by the third session of the Islamic Conference of Youth and Sports Ministers, which was held in Istanbul in 2016. Now, this report puts forth that the performance and ability of youth to act as agents of cultural and economic sustainability largely depends on how well policymakers today can address ongoing and upcoming challenges. It examines and evaluates the challenges faced by youth in various areas such as economy, policy, education, health, and culture, as well as suggesting actionable insights for policymakers. So just studying a topic is not enough for us, but to actually generate policy recommendations that are actionable and that can affect change is also important. Now, generally, the technical background reports that we publish are underpinned with the focus on policy research and literature. But for the 2020 edition of the report, we went one step further by conducting our primary research in the form of the Uic Youth Survey in collaboration with Icyf. Now, the OIC Youth Survey was designed to gather information from national institutions. So we went to the 57 OIC member states. We asked their national ministries, which were responsible for youth, some questions, and we conducted a survey in 3 languages, which is the Arabic, French, and English. These institutions answered questions which allowed us to track the progress of member states in terms of their policies towards youth in 5 key thematic areas, which are also the same areas as in the OIC Youth Strategy that Ms. Amal went over. We collected responses from 22 member states, which belong to Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East and Northern Africa, Europe and Central Asia, and East and South Asia and Latin America. Now, what we found is, as Ms. Amal said, is that 41% of the world's current population is under the age of 25 right now, okay? This is more than ever before in human history. And nearly 28% of young people between the ages of 15 and 24 currently reside in the 57 OIC member states. Now, that is over 341.5 million young people, which is a very, very massive population to not take seriously, right? Furthermore, according to the United Nations, the OIC member states will account for almost a third of the world's youth population in the coming decades. And on one hand, this youth bulge gives OIC member states an enormous advantage over countries that are home to, let's say, aging populations. For example, younger populations means less strain on social protection systems, better quality of human capital, and an overall active socioeconomic environment. But on the other hand, having a larger youth population also exposes OIC member states to vulnerabilities that are unique to what young people face. For example, a higher number of fresh young graduates means the need to create employment at a more rapid pace. It also impacts the social and cultural fabric of societies, often resulting in generational conflicts. However, what is clear is that without adequately addressing and responding to such vulnerabilities, OIC member states cannot fully utilize the potential of a youth bulge. Now, when we look at the situation of our youth, let's say in OIC member countries, in terms of their education and literacy rates, we notice that the OIC average, according to our report, is significantly below the other country groups. Like, for example, while the literacy rate for youth in all other country groups is above 90%, in OIC it's at 82.3%. Now, breaking down these figures further into male and female literacy rates, our findings indicate that there's almost a 7% difference between male and female literacy in OIC countries. Now, the gender disparity in literacy rates is the highest amongst OIC member states, and it exists for several reasons. For example, there are cultural, social, and even economic reasons for why female literacy is lower. For example, girls from lower income households may choose to drop out of school to support their household income or take care of their families, etc. Now, another important indicator of young people's education, the condition of young people's education, is how much the government spend on tertiary education. That's higher education, right? On average, in OIC member states, governments spend about $1,199 per student, while the world average is nearly 4 times this, and the average of developed countries is nearly 10 times the OIC average. Now, this can possibly, some of the reasons are a lack of infrastructure and investment in education systems, curricula that is deficient or unable to yield youth that is prepared for the labor market, and then also the socio-cultural attitudes towards education. Now, there are also some macro level factors such as internal conflicts, natural and environmental disasters that affect OIC member states somewhat disproportionately. And all of these factors, of course, affect young learners and affect how much governments spend on education directly. Similar to education, unemployment is another major cause of concern for policymakers in OIC states, especially youth unemployment. Because on average, in 2019, youth unemployment in OIC was relatively higher than any other country groups. As you can see in the chart on the left-hand side, it was at 13.9%. In the chart on the right-hand side, you can see that the youth inactivity rate for the same period was also quite high, at 61.3%. Now, youth inactivity refers to the proportion of countries' young people that are not actively engaged in the labor market. They are neither working nor looking for a job. Right. It is a fact that economic challenges faced by youth are closely linked with several factors such as education, training, informal or vocational education, infrastructure quality, and also the effectiveness of governance. And although the youth unemployment in the formal sector is very high, there is also this entire phenomena of youth being employed by the informal sector in the member states. And youth employment in the informal sector poses risks. For example, youth tend to suffer more from the risk of poverty and marginalization within an informal economy, since they have very limited knowledge about their rights. One of the other main factors that determines the welfare of youth in the member states is obviously health. And health is a major driver of socioeconomic progress as well. It is a factor that fosters human development and alleviates poverty. A healthy young person can contribute to economic development because they tend to live longer and stay more productive over the span of their lives. Plus, healthy youth generally means less burden on a country's health systems. And we know this now during the pandemic more than ever before. Our report highlights different indicators for youth health. We cover a lot of different things such as addictions, age at first marriage, adolescent fertility rates, and prevalence of HIV, amongst other things. But for today, I want to focus on just one of these important indicators. That is the major causes of death amongst youth. And while developed countries battle with non-communicable diseases, such as diabetes, obesity, and physical inactivity, in OIC countries, we are struggling with communicable diseases, which are actually quite preventable. So 6.5% of major causes of death in OIC amongst youth occurs from communicable diseases, preventable diseases. 5.9% occurs from injury and 4.8% from non-communicable diseases. Other than these major causes of death, it is also important to point out the negative health impacts that conflicts, displacements, natural disasters have on young people's mental health across the member states, especially amongst young people who are marginalized, such as migrants, refugees, IDPs, etc. So the 2020 report, State of Youth report, also examines mental health laws, policies, and plans, right, in the member states. And what we've found is that this topic is of grave relevance to young people that face multiple stressors in their environments on a daily basis, but it is often overlooked or stigmatized in various societies. We found that a significant majority of OIC countries, that's 74.5% to be exact, have a policy or plan specifically designed for mental health. Now, although this is lower than any other country groups, it shows significant development in how many member states are ready to address the issue of young people's mental health. Moreover, more than half of the OIC member states also have particular laws concerned with mental health of young people. Obviously, as you all are well aware, laws are better because they are enforceable. Now, the findings of the 2020 State of Youth report show that OIC member states have made significant improvements in the past decade pertaining to youth, but there are still areas that require substantial attention and resources in order for our young people to build brighter futures for themselves and to contribute to their societies productively, right? However, as this session is dedicated to designing post-COVID humanity, and also because COVID-19 is pretty much the elephant in every room that researchers are in right now, what COVID-19 pandemic and its response by different governments has done is that it has resulted in a severe regression in human development around the world. This pandemic has not just revealed what is wrong with existing systems, but also exacerbated existing inequalities, which is, I think, directly relevant to the course that you're taking with Dr. Evren. And young people have literally borne the brunt of this pandemic more so than others, because you face multiple challenges when it comes to, let's say, your current life and in the near future as well. For instance, the closure of schools and universities has widened the socioeconomic disparities and inequalities amongst students or learners from different socioeconomic classes. With the impacts it has on education and employment outcomes for young people, the closure of schools, that is, has also revealed the different kind of inequalities that are often effectively countered by national school systems. And lastly, the closure of schools has also revealed the gaping digital divide amongst different learners, which will undoubtedly be instrumental for socioeconomic and human development in the near future. Now, it has also worsened, as I mentioned earlier as well, it has also worsened the occurrence and scope of mental strains amongst young people, such as anxiety about their futures, uncertainty, unpredictability, depression related to limited mobility and isolation, etc. Loss of education and employment have also worsened the economic standing of young people, with many facing the risk of poverty. Their solution often is to find low-paying, unsafe, or unregulated jobs in the informal sector during the pandemic, which is likely to also have many, many negative impacts in the long term in the future. Now, the situation is particularly bad for marginalized youth, as I mentioned, such as migrants and refugees, or even students who are studying abroad, who are right now isolated in their dorm rooms and things like that, whose access to education and social services have been obstructed by the pandemic. And newer and more pervasive forms of limitations, such as limited access to electronic resources, etc., are likely to affect young people for many years to come. And youth not being able to participate in their societies, either socially or politically because of the pandemic, will also likely impact the socioeconomic well-being of the societies themselves, because young people now are more active socially and politically than ever. However, what we can do in the face of such limitations is to ensure that the response and recovery programs that we design are considerate of the unique challenges faced by youth. Now, each different demographic of a society has faced this pandemic and the challenges posed by it in a different way. Now, a few ways to address such limitations are also reported in our State of Youth report, although not in the context of pandemic, because unfortunately we finalized this report before March 2020. So we weren't able to really capture the essence of how the pandemic, but we do have other reports that have discussed this matter in depth. In this report, however, we highlight numerous policy recommendations for the advancement of youth. Here, I'm just going to discuss the four major ones. It is important to understand that the OIC member states are diverse in the level of their socioeconomic development. OIC has member states from all different geographical regions. Some are high income, some are low income, some are middle income, etc. And therefore, the group of young people that are currently residing in the 57 OIC member states are not homogeneous, right? They're very different. They come from different cultures, speak different languages, they have different experiences. Therefore, it is important to increase and deepen intra-OIC cooperation on youth, right? Many OIC countries have positive programs or initiatives. We have discussed this in a separate chapter in our report, actually, on youth. And through cooperation, OIC countries can share their practices, lessons learned, and expertise with each other, which will be beneficial not just in the short term, but also in the long term. Education is an important aspect of young people's lives. As indicated earlier, OIC averages for male and female literacy, overall literacy, are far below the other groups. Therefore, OIC countries should seek to invest more in education because that can considerably contribute to young people's advancement. Education policy should also integrate the changing dynamics in a world and prepare young people better for the labor force. There's often, which we have noticed in middle to low development countries, there's often a disconnect between the quality of the education system and the kind of graduates that they're producing and the requirements of the labor market. Youth economic participation is also critical for young people to build sustainable lives and actively contribute to the economic development of their societies. In the OIC member states, they've taken several steps in enhancing economic participation of youth at the national level. These national level initiatives and policies are a great platform for potential intra-OIC cooperation as well. For instance, OIC member states are rich in terms of best practices in the area of promoting employment and entrepreneurship of youth, which can be shared with other member states. Finally, raising awareness about challenges faced by the young people, about their advancement, is very, very critical. We have many traditional outlooks and views, perspectives that downgrade the importance of youth. We have issues with youth social participation or youth becoming inactive, and therefore there is a very, very serious need to increase awareness amongst youth themselves and other demographics and the general public regarding the issues that young people face, their needs, the challenges faced by them, and how to effectively overcome them. That being said, thank you very much for listening to me go on for so long. I think I'm pretty much above the time limit that Ms. Amala was supposed to keep. But the reason why our report is very, very relevant to your course is because young people, which are a massive population in the OIC member states, often face the gravest forms of inequalities. And it is very concerning because these are the people that are going to define the future of these countries, especially Muslim youth in OIC member countries. So thank you very much again for inviting me, and I hope you have taken very valuable takeaways from my presentation. And please feel free to contact us for any further questions or clarifications.
Thank you very much for this productive presentation and valuable inputs, Ms. Tazin, where you highlighted the content of the report. And also I would like to thank all the district team for producing this very important and informative documents that will really help all the policymakers, students, and researchers. Now, after Ms. Tazin presented the content of the reports, I would like to continue the second part of the presentation with the research as an important aspect in the OIC Youth strategy and what was the role of Icyf in preparing the State of Youth report. So the strategy produced developing research tools and indicators in order to come up with an evidence-based youth strategy and monitor the recorded progress over time. It was crucially important to develop a set of relevant research tools. For example, we have the surveys, questionnaires, and indicators, and we have also the Youth Development Index. And in this context, relevant OIC institutions were requested to develop these tools under the coordination of the OIC General Secretariat. And here, let me give you some examples. We have what is called the Youth Policy Score Indicator, or YPSI, for OIC countries developed by CESRIC in the State of Youth reports. And this indicator is a tool not only for national monitoring on youth policy development, but also for developing new and effective channels of intra-OIC collaboration. We have also the State of Youth reports as an informative and analysis tool that helps us to understand the challenges faced by youth and the prospects also for the future. As Ms. Tazin mentioned, we are putting there the recommendations and the best practices from the OIC member states. And also in general, research on youth issues as program of the OIC Youth strategy, as you see in the screen, is based on national youth reports coordinated with the steering committees, also evaluating the overall progress toward the achievement of the objectives, identifying the best practices in terms of youth policy and youth programs, and involving as much as we can youth in the member states in the research process. And here I will talk a little bit about the State of Youth report, but from a technical part, because Ms. Tazin already introduced all the contents of the report. So the aim of this report is mainly to examine the state of OIC member states and it's covering different sectors that we explained. The team used the survey to collect information regarding the various aspects of the youth in OIC countries, and the survey was utilized in the State of Youth report to highlight the strengths, weaknesses, and good examples of youth. And also, it provides us an opportunity to track the process of member states in terms of their policies toward youth. And lastly, it provides us recommendation and best practices as good examples that the government needs to know about their youth projects, and also NGOs who are working in these countries may know more about these good examples and best practices. Next slide, please. Next one. So we have Icyf, which is the Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum, as an implementing institution and as a partner in preparing this report. The Islamic Cooperation Youth Forum is an international organization affiliated to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and it was established in 2004, was granted the status of affiliated institution, and we are envisioning empowering youth across the OIC region. We are also actualizing their full potential for the sustainable development of their nations, communities, and the world, driven mainly by the Islamic values of excellence, unity, and cooperation. And the mission of Icyf is building the capacity of OIC youth through strategies, policies, frameworks, and programs and projects. Also, the main role is how to transform decision into programs and projects for the benefits of youth. And for this, we have an approach to youth development in the OIC, which called strategic youth development and capacity building. Next slide, please. And it represents the 5 E's, which is educate, empower, engage, enrich, and excel. And under this approach, we are seeking to achieve strategic goals 10 or 11. One of them is promoting youth solidarity and cooperation, enhancing inclusive youth policy and institution in the OIC, developing youth intellectual capacity, building youth entrepreneurship, and empowering girls and young women in the OIC. For the reports, next slide, please. For the role of Icyf in the reports, we can describe it as a technical role based on mainly circulating the surveys by sending them to the Ministries of Youth and Sports, submitting the best practices that we have in the OIC region, and also following up the process with the Ministries of Youth and Sports. So this is our role mainly in the preparation of the State of Youth reports. And I would like to conclude by this. Thank you very much. I hope that the presentation was useful. And now I would like to open the floor for the question-answer session. For those who would like to ask a question about the presentations, you can just raise your hand.
Can I go first, if that's okay?
Sure, doctor, sure.
So my question actually is not a question, but just kind of partially a question, partially not a question. So the course that we do actually is like, in fact, inequalities. We are looking at it in 3 different dimensions. First, measuring inequality, and then understanding different aspects of inequality, the kind of the causal mechanisms. And the third one actually is tackling inequality. So, and as you would imagine, that there's no one single actor, right? It's like dealing with tackling inequality. But so on that front, I was wondering, how does the report actually speak to these 3 layers, like measuring dimensions of inequality and tackling inequality? Because often we expect the states or public sector, right, the governments to fix these issues. But even today, we were discussing that sometimes states have to kind of make some choices. Like, if they want growth, then they cannot really kind of like deal with inequality at the same time, because in order to grow, inequality is one of the unintended consequences, or if they want to put more on green growth or kind of more environmental friendly growth, then there is another cost. So, so my point is there are trade-offs that states face, and there are opportunities that individuals, communities, organizations, civil society, non-government can do. So within this complexity, how do you see the kind of the future? Is what I mean. Are we measuring inequality in a right way? Are we measuring things like data, for instance? So every stage measuring dimensions and tackling every aspect, there are some challenges. There's like opportunities and limitations. So I was wondering, I know it's a bit of big question, but I think you got my point.
Yes. Ms. Tazi?
Yes, Ms. Amal. Do you want both of us to tackle this one by one?
Yes, I want.
No. Any part you like to do, actually, as you wish. Okay. Yeah.
So I mean, let me just put out some very basic facts first. So CESRIC and even Icyf and OIC on the whole is a diplomatic organization, right? We are an intergovernmental organization that works with 57 member states, but our role is not that of a police officer. We are a diplomatic institution, and we work along with the member states. They have a problem. We try to research it. We try to help them with policy recommendations to fix it. We basically do a lot of facilitation, you can say. So most of the work that we do is not enforceable. So if there is a trade-off, first of all, Dr. Evren, in response to your question, if there is a trade-off to be, there's a choice to be made, it is entirely up to the national government itself and the national ministry that is working on the topic. That being said, we realize very starkly the difference between development levels of different member states, between the cultures of different member states, and the general social, economic, and political environments. And we, as much as we can, try to work while keeping the harmony and while keeping all of these in mind. Now, if it means tailoring specific solutions, then that is what we will do. We don't challenge or we don't aggressively, tell them to do anything at all. Now, that being said, in a diplomatic role, what we do is we do technical background research. So, for example, our report, the State of Youth report, if you go through it as a third party who doesn't know anything about youth or OIC or what we do, if you go through this report, the very least that you are going to take away from this is you're going to know exactly where the young people, Muslim youth in OIC member countries stands right now. How is their education? You'll know that it's actually they're doing relatively less literate than the other groups, the developed countries, the non-OIC developing countries. You'll know what their economic situation is like. You'll know what their rate of social participation is. You know what their overall health is like. The way that it contributes to measuring inequality is that in our secondary analysis through using data from like the UN, IMF, World Bank, things like that, we tell you exactly how much more needs to be done, where the gap is, and sometimes we go as far as to tell you the gap between male and female young people. Sometimes we go as far as to tell you the gap between, let's say, from different socioeconomic classes and things like that. So measuring inequality is not a very straightforward task, as you are well aware. Some aspects of it are very intangible. Some aspects of it are quite abstract. Not all of it is quantifiable. What we do is we take indicators that we can quantify, that are being quantified by different development agencies all around the world, and we try to make comparisons based on that. This is what we do towards measuring inequality, right? We don't say inequality, we just tell you the relative position. Because obviously, since we do this in a diplomatic capacity, it's often very prickly to kind of lay the blame on something or something like that. Then the second thing we do is the way we tackle these topics is from the state's perspective. So not from the young people's perspective. We go, when we do a survey, Icyf and CESRIC, we go talk to the national ministries. We ask the policymakers, the people in charge, what are they doing? What do they think? So everything that we generate, especially in terms of in this report, the survey findings from the 22 member states, are what the governments themselves are saying, what the national ministries themselves are saying. Now that is your first-hand account where you can take it and you can say, okay, if the government is saying that there's a problem with, let's say, skills education, that the young people in our countries are not getting enough skills to actually fit the labor market requirements, then that is a straightforward problem. That's what makes young people in OIC countries unequal when compared to young people from developed countries. In terms of the types of inequalities, now there are many. The one that we look at are mostly those that are quantifiable, and some of those which are more abstract. So for example, we will take something very measurable like literacy, let's say, but then we will also, as we do in our reports, we'll analyze why literacy rate is low. Then we will look at all the secondary policy research, and we will realize that a lot of people have studied this, and they realize that, let's say, female literacy rate is low because girls might have unequal responsibilities at home. They're caretakers, they want to take care of their families. Sometimes young boys drop out of school because they get a job to support their families financially. These are all the less tangible aspects of it. We don't categorize because this is not an academic publication to begin with. This is a very, very clean-cut policy publication. So we don't go into a lot of academic discussions and dialogues, but we do try to cater, and we do try to look at the different, multifaceted issues that affect, that otherwise affect very straightforward indicators like education, employment, inactivity, things like that. And then lastly, in terms of tackling inequality, that's something that we definitely do, even though we don't use those exact words, but by generating generalizable policy recommendations, which is pretty much the last section of every single one of our publications, is that we give the policymakers different ideas and solutions and recommend how they can tweak and guide the policies in their countries, depending on their environment, to better address the needs of, let's say, young people. So we can say that, raise more awareness, because we know that raising awareness will at some point have, let's say, a ripple effect, and will affect, end up inadvertently affecting things like inequality, things like marginalization, like vulnerability, all of that. So we do, in terms of addressing inequalities, we do a lot, but we don't do it in an academic sense. So we don't talk about it a lot. There's no long-winded introduction or a conclusion. We do it pretty much, we take what is there, and we try to use it to formulate what policymakers in our member states require. And again, the policy recommendations that we generate are based on what the policymakers have said, what the policy literature is saying, and what we think is enforceable. Now, we have to keep in mind that a lot of the member states are low-income economies or low development economies, which don't necessarily have like millions or billions of dollars to invest in things like making education more equal or making economic opportunities more equal. So we also have to keep that in mind. So I hope this answers your question and gives an idea about how CESRIC, and I think even Icyf, tackles this issue of inequality. Is we do it I would say in a policy sense. And I come from an academic background, so I don't know if your students will be able to really grasp this, but the way you study a subject in academia is completely different from the way that we do it in policy circles. And ours is a more like clean-cut, straight, hygienic approach to it.
Yes. Shall I continue, Ms. Tazin, from the point that you... Dr. Evren? Okay, let me then continue. Actually, I agree with you, Ms. Tazin, that I think the report is a part of the solution. It's a tool toward betterment of the youth problems and the challenges. It's a kind of consultation and advice, because we are clarifying the situation for the decision makers, for the ministers, etc. And I think three categories can benefit from the content of the reports and contribute to the change, or what Dr. Evren called quality. So maybe researcher, because it's full of data, information, and it's official data, as you mentioned. We collected it via surveys from the ministries of youth and sports. So the source of this data is official, our governments, and it's also analyzing this data, because researchers are adding their comments, are adding their analysis to this data, and they are reading it in a kind of academic framework. And secondly, the decision makers who have the will to change this situation can benefit and can understand what are the challenges that youth are facing. And the third category, I think, they are the NGOs or the institution who are active in the field of youth. They can rely on this report to understand the situation of youth and also to see the best practices, because we are giving a recommendation, we are giving best practices that they may support, or they may make some project like this. And as ICYF, I think we have one of our values, which is service. We seek to dutifully to serve Muslim youth in further building their capacities and enhancing their active role in different sectors. And by this, we are tackling this inequality via different projects and programs, because unemployment is a kind of economic inequality, and we are here working with CESRIC on VET programs, which may provide a vocational and training education for the youth. We are also working on OIC intern program, which provides the youth with the training and to enhance their practical skills. And for, I think, the past years, we have more than 117 students who got an internship, and it's really a good number. Also, we are working on the Young Business Hub project, where we bring the young entrepreneurs, the startups, with the institution who can provide the fund for their job and for their ideas. So this is how we are tackling the structural inequality, either social or economic or cultural. So I hope that I give the answer to Dr. Evren. Okay, so we don't have any other questions from the audience. So I would like to thank Ms. Tazin Korshi. Thank you, Ms. Tazin, very much for the presentation, for the discussion. I hope it will not be the last session for the State of Youth report. I hope to see you in other opportunities, as well as my colleagues who worked on the State of Youth report last year. I would like also to thank all the participants who joined us from Mohammed bin Khalifa University. I would like to thank Dr. Evren for organizing this session, my colleagues in the technical team. Thank you very much. Please check our website, CESRIC website. You will find a lot of reports, a lot of information, a lot of opportunities, as well as ICYF website. We will share both of the links with Dr. Evren to share it with the students. And we hope to see you soon in other activities and programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Amal. Have a nice evening.